98% of all adoptions in Japan are of adult men around 25 to 30 years old. Upwards of 80,000 of these adult adoptions occur every year. But adoption in Japan is rarely about raising children. Rather, adult adoption is about continuing the legacy of a name or a business. Therefore, adult adoption is about inheritance. And the inheritance here is both economic and a social class. In this video, you will discover the origins of adult adoption dating back to ancient Rome, learn about the companies like Suzuki that rely on adult adoption, and gain an understanding of why this practice is still popular in Japan today. If you're like me and have any sort of Japanese-based interest, whether it's anime or sushi, and you want to get closer to that interest by learning the Japanese language, then I'd highly recommend you go check out Nihon 123. Nihon123.com gives you the immersive learning benefits of intimate interaction without having to physically be in Japan. It's like getting the opportunity to learn Japanese while roaming the streets with a Japanese friend. There's a link down in the description to Nihon123, and I highly recommend you go check it out. Back to adult adoption, there's actually a term for this called Mukoyoshi. And a Mukoyoshi is an adult man who is an adopted husband. The Mukoyoshi marries the daughter of a Japanese family and then takes on the family's last name. This Japanese practice originated with a Buddhist sect in the 12th and 13th centuries. Later, from the 1600s to 1800s, the samurai class used son-in-law adoption as a means for families with no sons to then have a male heir. Because Japan's laws dictate that the firstborn son inherits the family assets, this practice also greatly benefited second-born sons like myself, who could then become adopted and thus the leader of a family of their own. If we scroll back in time a little bit, adult adoption actually existed in ancient Rome. The Latin word adoptio refers broadly to adoption, but one of these kinds of adoptions was known as aggregatio. And aggregatio is when the adoptee had been acting as a legal adult but assumed the status of an unemancipated son for purposes of inheritance. Literally, it's the same here as Mukoyoshi. But back to Japan, Mukoyoshi may sound old and archaic, but the practice is very much alive and successful today. The last CEO of Suzuki was actually a Mukoyoshi himself. In fact, he was the fourth consecutive Mukoyoshi to run Suzuki. Chico Date runs a matchmaking website for women seeking a Mukoyoshi, and she's quite successful with it. Toyota, Canon, Suntory, and Nintendo are all family-run Japanese companies who may one day turn to the practice of Mukoyoshi to ensure their equity stays in the family. Interestingly, because of Mukoyoshis, we have 9 companies in Japan that have been family-run for over 1,000 years. Hoshi Ryokan is a traditional Japanese inn that has been in the family for 46 generations. Or how about the Nishiyami Onsen Hot Spring Spa? They've operated for 52 continuous generations, and both of these have relied on adopted heirs. If you want to learn more about the fascinating story of these 9 1,000-year-old Japanese companies, then check the link down in the description where that video will be posted for you. Adult adoption is still popular in Japan because it works well for businesses. Freakonomics shares that across the developed world, family firms underperform professionally run businesses. But in Japan, it's the opposite. Japan's strongest companies are led by scions, many of them adopted. If you compare the performance under different kinds of heirs, blood heirs versus adopted heirs, the superior performance of second-generation managed firms is pretty much entirely attributable to adopted heir firms. And I think that these 1,000-year-old companies are a case in point of this. Clearly, adult adoption in Japan has served a great purpose for their culture. Now, if you'll excuse me, I do need to go and see which Japanese companies are looking to adopt a tall white son.